Welcome back to the Valley Blueprint, the podcast where we break down how leaders turn strategy into execution and create real measurable value inside their organizations. My name's Shayla, and I'm from Value Driver. Today's episode is focused on a topic that comes up in almost every manufacturing conversation these days, and that's automation. For many small and mid-sized manufacturers, automation feels like something reserved for large enterprises with deep pockets, dedicated engineering teams, and takes years to implement. But the reality on the ground is shifting fast. And I'm excited to have a conversation today with Arsalan and Alex from Weldmatic, a company that's focused on making automation accessible and practical for manufacturers. So welcome, Alex and Arsalan.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having us, Sheila.
Yeah, welcome. Perhaps, Alex, for those who may not know who Weldmatic is, can you share with us the story behind the company and kind of the problem that you originally set out to solve?
Yeah, so we started Weldmatic back in 2023, April. The main goal in mind was to take the pain points away from the fabrication shops out there who's having difficulties in finding labor or having better quality, like consistent welds, and also being able to automate some of the parts that can be very strenuous for welders who's working on it all day long. And those are our kind of main reasons why we wanted to help people out to set up some cost-effective automation solutions. It's not, we didn't start this to replace welders. We started this to help the welders out. So with less welders out there, one welder can potentially work on multiple different cells at the same time and be able to do more than what a one person can do, as well as they don't have to be exposed to the kind of the hazardous settings at all times. They can kind of stand afar and be able to just control the robots and get the jobs now without without going home with a broken back, right? So
Yeah.
that's the main purpose why we started this company. We've been learning as well as we've been going in time here. Not everybody including us sometimes, has an idea of how to set these things up. So a lot of times we have to talk about, hey, we start with how much space do we have? How many people do you have? What's the company culture like for robotics and automation? And just trying to find a good middle ground where Weldmatic can kind of help out and implement solutions for them. Whether sometimes it's no solution, which can be a solution as well, but yeah, just knowing that what we can actually do and setting up the expectation right.
Wow, that's really neat. And were you in manufacturing or welding before, or what kind of drew you to this industry?
Yeah, so before I did my engineering, I was a welder fabricator for a number of years. So I kind of had a pretty good understanding of what the pains are to be the guy in the shop to make things, weld things, and whatnot. Um, Went through a couple of safety incidents, and also had the welder's fever twice after I stopped welding, which is just basically your body getting a very high fever for a number of days. Um, yeah, so I think a lot of the safety side of the purpose about Belmatic comes from kind of like my personal experience and what I've seen around from other guys working around me. So yeah.
That's very neat. And Arslan, you joined relatively recently, but the company's
Yeah.
fairly new in general. What kind of brought you into the mix, and what keeps you going and excited about what Weldmatic is building here?
So me and Alex actually went to school together, and he lured me back into working with him. But no, it's the idea behind of what they were looking at. They were looking at sort of bringing a solution for all these pain points, keeping in mind the safety of the welders as well, and how we can actually combat that labor shortage in the market
Mm,
that everybody sees coming, everybody talks about. So that kind of brought me in. I come from a background of sales and marketing, more on the HVAC, commercial HVAC side. So, having those sets of skills, bringing them over here and developing a network for Weldmatic and kind of getting the word out on what we are, what we're all about. And working with great people like Alex and the other co-founder we have, Gary, and the company culture. Something that we're trying to build within our company is, you know, fluidity, freedom, and then putting the customer or the client's, benefits in front of us as well. We're not just looking at what we can do for ourselves, but hey, how do we suggest and provide solutions to our customers that will make sense for them? What Alex said,
uh,
A, safety being a top concern, and then B, making sure we're not, making them spend or have a setup for them that doesn't make sense. And just keeping that, top of mind and going forward and you know, providing services in that way.
Very interesting. And let's kind of unpack that. Let's go into kind of who your customer is and why they're coming to you. What would you say are kind of the top 2 to 3 operational pressures that you're consistently seeing with people that you work with or that are reaching out to you to want to work with you?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the main focus being the small medium enterprise SMEs. A lot of the larger companies have already explored this a number of years ago, and we spend a good amount of time just sort of busting some myths in terms of how expensive it is. Oh, we can't
Mm,
do this. Oh, the operation is gonna be accepted by our workers, and it's exactly what Alex is saying. It's, we're providing a service not to replace welders, but to make their lives easier. It's something that, they could over or supervise multiple different setups, or, have the robot welding something that they might be repeatedly welding that, doesn't really take that much vision anymore. While the robot's doing that, they can be doing something more custom, something that, you know, is more aligned with their skill. So, Alex, maybe you could jump in here and say, what you think. Something I missed.
Yeah, so I think with a lot of the SMEs, like the big boys out there, they know exactly what they want, how they want to set it up, so they'll buy like 50 robots at a time. But a
mhm.
lot of our client base, they're just trying to look into how to automate things. So the one kind of common misunderstanding out there, automating something doesn't mean that you're going to be completely hands off. Like you're not going to be able to press go at the beginning of the day, and then by the end of the day, it's going to have done everything for you, right? We're far from
Mhm.
that right now. So what that's one of the things is just making sure that everyone's on the same page with what it is that we actually want to automate. What is it that we still want some human intervention into? So setting up the expectation is the big one. Making sure we understand what it means to automate for a client. The second one is bottlenecks. So oftentimes, a client looking at this one particular project, they'll say, "Hey, I want to get this one part done really fast with a robot." But what they're doing is they're getting rid of that bottleneck, but by doing so, they're also creating a different bottleneck elsewhere. So knowing that they have the resources to actually keep chasing the bottleneck, if they don't, they really shouldn't be trying to get rid of the current bottleneck. Instead, maybe try to match the speed with every other process so your flow is good. So that's the other thing too. It's not always about going 100% speed and making sure you can weld up these parts at 2 minutes instead of 10 minutes. Sometimes it makes sense to only cut down 2 minutes. So instead of 10 minutes, it's 8 minute cycle times. So just kind of looking at the overall picture of what the equipment's going to do for you in the shop, for your guys, and for your operations. So I would say those two are probably the big ones that we constantly have conversation with our clients to make sure that hey, we're not just chasing after a $10 million system here. We're going for something that makes sense as stepping stones, and Arsalan says they're like Lego blocks. So basically, like kind of building, starting with a basic system and being able to build on top of it, so that as time goes, we can improve on the system instead of switching everything over.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of jump in and say, I think Shayla, you've heard me say this before, is we look at it from a three-step process, right? Getting the people to buy in, that's our first thing. We make sure that we can actually show the customer a demo or test their parts out for them. Actually getting the welders that are going to be using the equipment themselves bought into this technology, and then talking to them about the process that's going to be needed. It's not going to be the same as your manual welding process. There's going to be a bit of change on your welding process in general when you introduce robotics or automation, and then it's equipment. If we can't have the people buy in, we can't have the process set up properly right off the bat, the equipment is just going to fail at the end of the day. So we have to kind of look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. No, that makes sense. I imagine too, like with this, a lot of the kind of, you mentioned bottlenecks, Alex. I imagine, like there's throughput constraints, quality control, cost per unit. All of these are factors that people are considering when they start these conversations. And if they haven't considered them, I'm sure those are things that come up as to, reasons why someone might kind of look at this option. Um, I appreciate you highlighting too, labor shortage is a massive problem right now across every industry. And if you can take a small piece of this away with, having some automation while utilizing the strengths of the team that you currently have to do those more specific tasks or creative tasks, I think that's a really neat mindset shift as well. That it's not taking jobs, it's helping replace current problems with shortage of staff. which I think hits home to a lot of people listening right now.
Yeah. And for the guys who's already working right now, like, it's just they're just broadening their skill set too, right? Like eventually more people will try to get some sort of robotics in their shop as we go in time here. And, it'll help the welders out too if they can get themselves familiarized with how to use these equipment. Even if it's not the exact same brand that they're going to be moving on to, at least they'll have an idea of like how to set up their flow. So like things make more sense for them too.
For sure. And I'm curious to know, Alex, perhaps you can answer this one. Weldmatic started, you said 2023, correct? How have you seen the mindset shift around automation changing for these SMEs, comparative 3 years, but I'm sure there's been some changes there. Have you noticed that at all in the industry, and what's that been like?
The one thing that's coming to my mind right now is so there's been more social media exposure to all these automation setups from various companies out there.
Hmm.
Um, so there's more people aware of what technology is out there, but the problem is, oftentimes these videos, you're very blindsided. It's pigeonholed, right? It's only looking at that one aspect of the setup. It's not looking at the entire setup there. So
Hmm.
there's oftentimes some misunderstanding of, what it means to put a robot in your shop with a welder on it. Um, I would say more people are aware of the idea of automation, but I think we're lacking as a world in terms of educating people on what it really does mean to automate things. I do see more people applying for grants and whatnot so that they can try to implement more automation equipment in their shop as well. Because the government kind of helping out with some of the manufacturing in Canada here. There's a lot of grants available, so I do see a lot of that as well. Um, yeah, Arsenal, anything
And
else you want to add?
yeah, I was gonna say the labor shortages are sort of making people take a quick look at what they can do in terms of, how they can continue the productivity or increase the productivity with the workforce that they have. And that and the lack of skilled labor coming down the line. So, welders like TIG welding, it's a very specific trade to have. How do they battle or how do they combat not having a TIG welder when they're doing a whole lot of aluminum? It's an aluminum shop. Like, what's the options for them? So for us, we look at, hey, how do we help them out on the automation side of points? And then we're also, doing R&D on laser welding, which to us seems like it's going to be the next step for a lot of the thin gauge materials, and it doesn't require a lot of highly skilled individuals to use it either. So, we're always looking in that direction as well. And okay, we can't automate, but how can we help it? How can we help in any other ways?
Mm. No, that's an interesting point you make. And I imagine too, like a lot of people are thinking, and even listening right now, maybe thinking like we're not big enough for automation. This isn't
Oh,
relevant yet. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, Arsalan and I can probably attest to that. Both of us have kind of visited shops or been to our client shops and out of nowhere out there between BC and Ontario here.
Hmm.
These are shops that you wouldn't realize it's a shop from the outside on the streets. So if you go in and it's literally a barn. But I mean, if those guys are already trying to get robots in there to help themselves out, because one of their problem being a rural area is finding help and finding people who can weld, right? So if those guys are looking into it, I'm sure anybody with access to internet would be able to kind of look at similar things. In terms of like cost and the budgeting and whatnot, I mean, that part is a tough one. That depends on each individual business and like how they're operating things, what kind of jobs they get throughout the year. But other than that, in terms of, like, hey, does our shop, is it time for us to start getting robots in? Technology has advanced to a point where it's very easy to use. It's easy to learn. I would say, like most systems out there, you can have at least one or two guys trained up on it to a point that they can actually use the system pretty well within a week. So yeah, the fact that the ease of use has definitely been improving across the board for all technologies out there, it definitely helps people to get a less overwhelmed before they commit to this.
yeah, and they like the smaller companies will look at the bigger companies and say, hey, we don't do production at that level that they're doing. They're doing thousands or hundreds of thousands of pieces that are coming down the production line. But at the same time, what Alex touched on is the ease of use and the technology changing so much that like having a job that does hundreds of pieces is still beneficial for you to have an automation cell doing it for you. But at the same time, that one cell you can have up to 1,000 programs preset. You can kind of build your library if you're doing certain product lines, if you're doing certain parts and batches that are coming in every, month, 2 months, 3 months, and you've got, 400 of those that you want to do. So the versatility of switching between parts and welding different parts, it's making it a lot easier for some of the smaller shops to kind of invest that into it, and invest that money into it, and start using it. And especially like from our standpoint, we say that a simple sell for us, you're spending about $80,000 Canadian, which is probably less than a welder's salary. And at that point,
Absolutely.
it's not that they're going to be stuck with a big investment, but it's like, hey, why don't you try it out? And then, like Alex mentioned before, the Lego approach, we call it, is once you get comfortable with the smaller setup or a simpler setup, we can start working with you to develop a larger setup, or adding on to the current setup that you have. So, a lot of that gets taken into account when we're talking to all of our customers.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's kind of like when you're first setting up your kitchen, you start by your basic needs like plates and cutlery, but eventually you need all these different shelvings and racks to kind of build onto your kitchen so that you have a better, functional kitchen that you want, right? So like for us, it's like if you have the basic robot with the basic positioner or whatever it is, like a very like, like somewhere around the 80 to $100,000 mark, once you start using it, you'll start to come up with some ideas on, hey, maybe I can do this, maybe I could try this, right? So we
Mm,
have a couple of clients who will call back after install's been done and ask us about, hey, like, can we do this now with it? So we help them kind of, entertain the idea what that looks like, what the limitations are, how it would actually help them, or maybe it's not the greatest idea. But yeah, so a lot of our system, we can, it's all about, hey, sort of it's basics and it's built on top of it.
hmm. And what would you say are some of those like hidden costs of not automating? What like leaders don't often, quantify or consider in this process as well?
I think the cost of not automating, I think it would depend at the end of the day. But the first, I wouldn't say it's a cost, but I would say you're taking a risk, maybe a higher risk than it used to be before. I mean, employing someone has always been a risk for every business out there. But if you're at this stage in time and, like with more people not wanting to go into trades and do some welding and, get their hands dirty, I would say they're taking a bigger risk in not looking at alternatives to help out their current existing welders to actually support the workload that they have.
Mm,
So not only is that they're not going to, it might be harder to find people, but it might also be hard to retain people if you're not making your jobs easier, right?
right.
So I would say
That's really
that's closest thing to being a cost of not automating.
Yeah, and then I would jump in on what Alex is saying. You suffer in the consistency of the product as well, when you're not, able to find good help either. So you're having to, gouge the weld, redo it, add to the production time. Now your production is a lot slower than you anticipated, and away you go. It would depend on the company and what they're doing. Obviously, at the end of the day, if they have a need to, you know, increase production, then yeah, it's a great way to do that if they can't find good help either.
Yeah, so like one way we look at least like even from our own observation internally, so I'm the only welder in the company, but everybody in the company currently can operate the robot to weld something out. So what I'm trying to say is that it's hard to become a good welder manually, but it's not that
mhm,
hard to learn how to use a robot to weld something as long as there's someone guiding them on, hey, this is the weld we're looking for. You should set up this way. But in terms of the programming part, it's not too hard. And the weld parameters it usually comes from your weld procedure sheets. And so you usually have that tabulated somewhere on a drawing and whatnot, or someone who's experienced in the company who can help you out with that. But anybody can really pick up that pendant and program it out. You can do a lot of things with it. So yeah. So point being,
I can totally attest to that. He's-
no,
Alex has seen
uh,
Alex
yeah,
has seen me manually weld with the torch gun, and it's absolutely atrocious. And then you put a pen in my hand, and I'll put down a straight bead. But with the manual torch, you can't get my hand to stop shaking.
yeah. So there's that. The learning curve is much lower for the robot. I mean, the caveat being depends on how complicated the system is. Like a basic setup, fairly easy to use. Anybody can kind of pick it up and learn within half hour to an hour there. But obviously, as we build the system, if there's more sensors, tracks in different positions, a little bit different. But the starting point, at least, the learning curve is much lower than learning how to weld manually.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
Interesting.
then just adding to the point of, automation and making it easier for customers. It might not just be welding that they're struggling with. It might be palletizing, it might be pick and place, it might be grinding, things like that. So something that, we just launched in our company earlier this year is a line of cobots. It's a cobot called Dobot. Funny name, but it works, Dobot Cobot. But the line of Dobot Cobots that we have essentially will take care of all the other applications that people might be looking for. And this has happened from visiting shops and going into places, and they've asked like, "Hey, we might not have some work for the, welding robots, but what about X, Y, and Z?" And we're like, "Okay, you know what? Yeah, we can jump into that world now and kind of start exploring." So part of our Toronto shop there, with one of our coworkers, is an R&D application. So they're just testing out different things that they can be doing in other applications as well. So we're called Weldmatic, but we're getting more automation than just welding.
I
well, it
love
is
that.
well
No, and I
automated.
I think that's a good point too, in terms of, we work with a lot of business owners and improving their strategy and kind of looking at their operations and growth plans. And, a conversation we often have is a market diversification. And I think a lot of people saw this over the last few years as markets changed and shifted and demand changed. And if your company wasn't already thinking ahead of the different ways they could support their customers, you kind of start to fall behind. And so not only are you doing that in terms of your own business, but I think also bringing automation in, like you kind of alluded to, you focus on your core products that can push out very quickly. Now you're able to have the capacity to expand what your product offerings are. So I think that's a really neat link between what you're doing internally as a company, but then also how you're helping your customers do that as well. Now I want to kind of take a step back, and can you walk me through kind of what that typical automation journey looks like for SMEs? What is step one? What is step one?
Step one is always some sort of a visit to their shop. So we like to go kind of see what their current process is, whether it's manual or a hybrid of some robotics and some manual work. Just to try and understand like what is it that they're currently going through, what their pain points are, and then like right after that would be kind of their wish list of what they're looking for. It could be as simple as, hey, I want to automate this, to as specific as, a guy say, hey, I've thought about this position and this position with however many robots and whatnot. So it can be as detailed as they want and sometimes not at all. So it's kind of a get to know each other phase where, we're learning about what is it that they're trying to solve, and they're trying to learn about what Weldmatic Connect will, what we can do for them. So after that first stage, we go through a series of I'd say like preliminary proposals where we put these cells together in our CAD models to show them the reachability of the TCP, what the approximate cycle times would be. And from there, we keep working on to the final design, like what the final setup will look like, where is it going to be situated in the shop. And in between all this, most times we'll ask for some work pieces that we can try out in our own shops. So we'll set it up in kind of a temporary setup. It wouldn't be the full setup, and just so that we can show them what the welding would look like, how the robot would behave, how fast it could move, or how slow it needs to be, what kind of different sensors we're using to help with their quality control. So yeah, so that's kind of the overall outlook of what we do, and in between, depending on the detail of what it is we're talking about, there might be some other steps, but that's kind of the general outline of
Yeah.
how we go
And
through.
and all of this is happening with collaboration with the customer. So the prelim proposals that Alex is talking about, when we come up with our initial idea, we'll have a meeting with the client, show them what we've got, what we've got, and then they'll give us pointers on, hey, these are expectations. This is what we're actually looking for, or we don't have that much space in the shop, so this is how much space we have. What do we do? And we'll go back and we'll redo it, and we'll come back to the client, and we'll have those conversations, sort of like repetitive conversations, until we're all happy with the product. And like Alex said, then we'll get the test pieces. We'll give them the welding parts back after they've been welded, in case they want to test it out, or get them etched or get them cut. Whatever testing they want to do on it, they can do as well. But yeah, that after that would be sort of like a pricing breakdown of everything that we kind of came up with and discussing that as well as a budget price. So we can do anything from, I think, just a basic setup to a setup with a positioner. Sometimes we do a setup and the customer does their own fixturing and their own positioners and things like that. You know, things like that. So we kind of work very collaboratively with the customers on their strengths and weaknesses and things like that.
Yeah, and
Very
often
nice.
there's different options on these setups because again, like, when we first talk to clients, they don't know the specifics. So we need to kind of generate a few ideas for them to see, hey, if you wanted to do everything with one robot, this is what it would look like.
Hmm.
Versus if you wanted to assign one part per robot, right? So we kind of figure out how to consolidate the setup so that it makes sense for their space, their budget and whatnot.
Hmm. And I know you guys work with a lot of different companies across Canada. Can you share, and you don't have to name the company, but share an example of, an SME who really embraced automation and, how they saw a significant shift in maybe efficiencies, quality, or even capacity?
Um, yeah, so I think there's two main breakdowns that and types of clients for that. There's one type where they focus on a very specific product group, and there's the clients who focus more on getting jobs. So they could be welding all sorts of things throughout the year, different materials and whatnot. Um, the ones who have a specific product in their mind, they're usually the ones who have a better idea of how they want to automate it. The people who have more interest in getting various jobs so that they can, keep getting work to do in their shop there. They're more concerned about making the system more versatile, which is kind of a tough thing to do with automation setup. It's just easier if you, and for robots, it is much easier if you pigeonhole it. Whereas a person is the opposite. But yeah, so that's kind of the big the type of clients that we're seeing across Canada here.
Like we've got clients that are like what Alex is saying is, hey, this is what I want. I want it in 4 months. This is
Mhm.
exactly what I'm looking for, and away we go. And then we have clients who, we'll go through a process of, I think one of our clients we spent about 8 months with until we got to a final sort of like finished product. And I was like, hey, this is what we're doing. But the initial call came in was like, hey, I don't know if I want this. I don't know when I want this, but I'm interested and I want to know more and I want to see what's possible for me. And it's like, okay, let's get that conversation going. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's fast. It just depends on, the education of the client on how much they're actually, how much education they already have about automation, or if they're starting from scratch. Because then it's a process of, okay, let's get you some information, let's get you sort of educated in what we're trying to do for you, and then we'll start getting into the more detailed stuff and the more
Mhm.
technical stuff.
What do you think is something that surprises people the most after they've implemented automation,
That's a good
or like
question.
an
Yeah.
unexpected outcome of the process?
I think I mean, something unexpected would be um, how they would incorporate that automation system into their current process flow. I think oftentimes that's one of the biggest because I think there's a bit of a lag in how they're able to estimate how long something's going to take. Usually in the setup phase, if you have to put in your own set of fixtures in there and then figure out how to program it, that could take longer than you wish. So I think there's a bit of a shock there. I think. Um,
I would add on there, I think the initial reaction to actually learning or the learning curve of the robots, it's like, oh yeah, this isn't too bad. And something that we started off with one of our controllers, we call it a fast pendant. It looks like an Xbox controller. So there's that immediate sort of relatability to something like that. So they're like, oh yeah, this is pretty easy to use. Couple of buttons, couple of joysticks. I can move the robot around. So it kind of gets them familiar. And I think just the learning curve of picking up even our more complex pendant and being able to put down the initial bead or be able to program certain welds right within half an hour. They're caught by surprise most of the time. 'Cause it's that myth, right? Oh my God, a programming robot. We don't know how to program. We don't know what we can do.
Yeah.
So it's the learning curve that I've noticed for sure.
yeah, like back in the days, they had to go to school to learn how to, write G code, understand G code. There is none of that anymore. Well, for most shops now. So, everything is it's all block based, it's all object oriented. So, it's pretty, when you start looking at it, it's pretty easy to figure things out, and you can't really do anything with it that's going to cause like a crazy accident or anything. There's a lot of safety net in place that'll stop you from doing that. So it's, the more you explore, the more you want to challenge yourself with that robot independent on programming, you're just going to be better at it. But yeah, it's not like a G code back in days where if you get one spacing wrong, everything just stops working, right?
Yeah, I remember like early in my career, I was building out a website for a company I was working for, and I had to learn coding, and it was the most frustrating thing. And now I don't know many people that have to do that, and they're doing way more than I was trying to do at the time.
Yeah.
And it reminds you on the back end, like in our shops when we're implementing different equipment together, there is some coding going on that we do to make sure it's all connected properly. But it's nothing that the client has to worry about once it's in their shop. Everything should already be kind of talking. And, all they have to do is use it with the easier UI layout. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Like we've got one of our clients that has, I think, 100 different programs that they're going to program in, and they're not even going to touch the pendant. It's going to go into a HMI system where they're just pressing a series of buttons together to call a specific program. Like it could be as simple as that for customers as well, where they just press for their operators that they don't want the pendant in their hand and mess up with any of their pre-programmed parameters. They can just press buttons together, a combination of buttons together, and it'll run the program that they want.
I'm curious, before we kind of wrap things up here, what do you guys see, looking ahead? What do you guys see emerging technology-wise that's going to matter most to SMEs kind of over the next 5-10 years here? What trends and things are coming, or things that you guys are excited about?
I mean, I can talk about laser welding because I see that coming down the line here for in terms of skilled labor of aluminum or stainless, thin gauge stainless welding and things like that. So I think we've been pretty excited about laser welding for about a year and a half now, and it's something that um, you know, is gaining traction. I think that's probably where we're going. It's all coming back to skill level. You need a very high skill level to operate laser welding. There's a higher safety significance for sure, but in terms of usability, having the product perform, I think we're pretty excited about what that looks like in terms of robot, cobot, handheld, in all sort of forms.
Mhm.
Very neat. Oh, very cool. That is exciting. And as we close out here, what would you say is kind of one message that you want every small, medium enterprise leader to walk away with about the future of automation?
Oh, it's a lot of pressure. Arsalan, you should take
I
this one.
know.
The $1 million question.
Could you repeat that question again? I got a little scared when you said it the first time.
Maybe I'll simplify it. What's one thing that you want people listening today to take away from this conversation in terms of automation?
I mean, the main thing I'd say is automation is not scary. It's not unreachable. It's something that's possible for all customers, for all companies out there. And our main focus being is we want to help you right off the bat without you actually committing solely to a solution. So if you have questions, if you want to know more about it, like feel free to reach out to us. We'll provide you with the information that you need. But I mean, that's what I would say. It's not unreachable. Anybody in the market can have some sort of automation in their shop to start up with and then grow from there. Alex, anything from you?
I was gonna say, well, along the similar lines, but I would also say to look at the other extreme end, like, not everything has to be automated either. So like it's gotta make sense. So even if you already look into the automation side of things and see what that would look like in your shop, our goal is that we can help you identify if that's actually a good solution for you or not. Like, just for example, if you're doing a lot of decor, and you're constantly having very, very different types of materials and weld joints and whatnot, that's going to be a one-off project. Doesn't really make sense to have a robot in there at all. But you could be looking into it because you saw it somewhere on TikTok or YouTube, and you can spend the time to kind of look into it. But then, just knowing if that setup actually makes sense for you is, I think, the more important thing. Um, so, basically saying you can look into it, you can find out what the right setup is, but it doesn't mean that you have to get it in right now. It could be a year from now or when the time is right, or, especially your company culture you want most of the people who's working in the shop and the office actually on the same page with us, right? Like Arsalan was saying earlier, if you implement something that nobody agrees with except for 2 or 3 of the buyers in the company, then it's never going to do any work. It's just going to collect us in the corner of the shop.
Yeah. And we've seen that plenty in our visits. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
you'll walk in. Have you guys done automation before? Yeah, the owner bought one. We never used it. It's sitting in the corner still. You're like, oh, you guys are not gonna be happy without me what I'm here to tell you. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's what Alex said. You know, we're not afraid to tell you that it's not possible right now. I think is the key word, because it does come down to getting the people to buy in and changing your processes. If you're not changing your processes, it's a recipe for failure.
Absolutely. Well, Arsalan, Alex, thank you both so much for joining us today. If you're listening and thinking about your own operation, start by looking at those bottlenecks, look at your staff shortages, the safety issues, or, that task that quietly limits your capacity every single day. And I'll make sure I link their contact information in the description of this episode, and where you can find them to reach out to have further conversations about how to add automation into your business. But thank you everyone for tuning in. Thanks for spending your time with us. If this episode sparked a new way of thinking about execution, leadership, or value, make sure to subscribe and share it with someone who's navigating these same challenges. And until next time, this is the Value Blueprint, where strategy meets execution. Thank you.